Hey John, these beer zombies are really getting out of control.
I know what you mean, Doug. Who would have thought that serving quadruple dry-hopped IPA out of red Solo cups would have sparked a chemical reaction that turns hazebros into juice-craving, flesh-eating monsters?
There's too many of them!
I'm out of ammo! What are we gonna do?
Have I taught you to nothing?
Josh Bernstein, fancy meeting you here in this abandoned hinterland of post-industrial decline.
The only way to fight poorly curated craft beer is with a sword of sublime beer enlightenment.
A book?
Books don't run out of bullets, baby. My new book, Drink Better Beer, features the must-know insights of more than 100 beer professionals. With their combined wisdom and sage advice about which brews to buy, how to taste beers, and what to eat with them, we'll drive back these undead hordes and shine the light of better beer onto a brave new world.
Yay!
Yay.
Welcome to See What You Can Brew, the podcast about homebrewing, community, and everything beer in New York City.
Brought to you by Bitter and Esther's in Brooklyn, New York. We're your hosts, Douglas Amport.
And John LaPola.
And welcome to the spooky Halloween episode. It's actually like 2 weeks till Halloween, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fine,
it's
but we're pretty spooky here all the time.
Spice beers are very spooky.
That was a pretty spooky opening there.
In today's spooky Halloween episode, we talk with Josh Bernstein, journalist and author, about the current state of affairs in craft beer and his new book, Drink Better Beer. It's a great episode with Josh, and we want to get right into it, but we've got a couple of things to get through first.
So we had another fantastic beer swap at the beginning of the month.
It was spooky.
It wasn't that spooky. It was a lot of good beer, but I guess you're all getting the gist of this episode. The winner of the Heath Sobel Memorial fucking Cup was Kenny Zamito. Yay, Kenny! Won with a spooky beer. It was actually a mixed firm, two different mixed firm beers that were quite delicious. So we interviewed Kenny, as we do all the winners of the Heath Sobel Memorial fucking Cup, and here I am, drunkenly speaking with Kenny. Drunk. I'm here with Kenny Zamito, the winner of the Heath Sobel Memorial fucking Cup, who won with his
mixed firm peach and apricot saison and sour stout.
So, Kenny, I know you for a long time, and just as a full disclosure, Kenny's lovely wife, Becca, works for us. She's is one of our employees. Yeah. Best employee ever, I agree. So how long have you been brewing, man?
A little over 2 years.
All right, I didn't know that. I thought it was a lot longer. Your beers are so good.
Yeah, I usually make 2.5 gallon batches, so it gives me opportunity to brew more often and refine recipes and go from there, and yeah, it's great.
Good idea. Now, did you learn to brew here?
Yep, took the 101 class and then took the recipe class too. It's been helpful.
So you learned from David?
I learned from David, actually, and from you too. And I took your kegging class too. It's great.
The demo. Yeah, demo. Cool. What'd you learn from me?
Everything, man.
I was going to say nothing, right? So, all right, so tell me about the beer.
So the first beer was a blend of two saisons with Brett and Lacto. And it's special to me because it was my first mixed firm sour beer. So I brewed that in May of 2018 and blended it with another saison February this year. We picked peaches from Becca's grandfather's tree and put them in the beer as well. So,
wow. This seems very hardcore for someone who's only been brewing for 2 years.
Hell yeah. That's how we do.
Oh, that one had apricot too, right?
Yeah, a little bit of apricot to kind of bring out some of those notes on the nose, like the fruit qualities. And then brewed a sour stout. It was actually just a regular stout. Brewed with Jack from the store and Wyatt, another club member, and
also former employee.
So we brewed a stout. We did it 4 ways. We did a coffee version, a regular version, a sour version, and a spicy version. In the sour version, I blended some of my mix from sour red into the beer to give it a little sour note, and it turned out pretty well.
So yeah, that's pretty awesome that you're doing this much blending and you're getting that much into making the beers taste as good as they taste. Were you like really into craft beer before brewing beer?
I got into craft beer a few years before, and I actually didn't really like beer until like 2014. So it's pretty cool.
What did you like before beer?
Just like random stuff like wine, cocktails, whatever. But like,
Never heard of them.
yeah, I don't know what that is. But yeah, I fell in love with stouts actually, and got me into craft beer, and it's been great.
What was the gateway?
Imperial Stout.
From?
Sure. Brooklyn Black Chocolate Stout.
Ah, that's a good one.
It's a good one.
Good one to get hooked on. Yeah.
Definitely.
So what do you do for a living?
I work in audiovisual for Major League Baseball, actually.
Very cool. Oh wow.
So nothing beer related, but it's a fun hobby. And I also play music on the side. It's great, man.
You have a band?
I do. It's called Proto. We're a 2-piece band, instrumental. It's good times.
And can we find you on Spotify or anything?
EP coming soon. You can find us on Instagram, proto.ny.
Anyway, thank you, Kenny. Congratulations on winning the Heath Sobel Memorial Cup. It's a kind of a big deal, you know.
It's a great honor.
Is it your first one?
It's my first one. Yep. I've been to a lot of swaps, and it's definitely an honor to take the cup.
Kenny, by the way, swept. Like, it was between him and Alex Calef, who's won it about 3 times.
Yeah.
And, in the long run, man.
It's time to step down, you know? New king in town.
All right, thanks, Kenny. Good ending.
Ooh, we're back.
Congratulations, Kenny. Kenny is also one of the featured brewers on Josh Bernstein's homebrew tour next month. We talked about this during the interview, but it's coming up November 9th, and you can get your tickets at joshuambernstein.com, or we will have the link on seewhatyoucanbrew.com, right?
Yeah,
we will have that.
We'll have the links for all this stuff.
So Josh has got a lot of stuff coming up. You'll hear all about it in the interview, but you're going to have to wait because I'm going to say more stuff. Also coming up in November, we've got Brew for a Cure. It's the 4th one that they've done. It's coming up at the Well in Bushwick on November 2nd. It's a fundraiser for St. Jude's Children's Hospital, which is a very good cause. It's put on by Charlie Gotthard and Brian Pope, who called themselves together Chuck Wagon. Pope Wagon. I'm sorry.
Wagon.
It's Pope Wagon.
Pope Wagon. Chuck Wagon's good.
Chuck Wagon's good. Well, I saw Charlie. We call him Chuck. Sorry, Charlie. Yeah, they call themselves Pope Wagon. They've been putting this on for 4 years. It's a great event. It's actually a contest. They judge this one. Yeah. And you can go and try a whole bunch of home brews from excellent home brewers in the area. It is on November 2nd at the Well, and we'll have the tickets.
We'll have the links to that.
Link on seewhatyoucanbrew.com. And that's about everything that's going on. I don't think there's anything too spooky
Nothing
happening.
spooky other than Bitter Nesters.
Bitter
Okay.
Nesters is spooky.
All right, without further ado, Josh Bernstein is a Brooklyn-based beer, food, and travel journalist, and he is the author of 4 books, including his most current writing, Drink Better Beer, which we had the opportunity to talk with Josh a couple weeks ago, and we talked with him a lot about what's going on in the craft beer industry, the state of the craft beer industry I thought was pretty interesting, and about beer slushies.
Which we absolutely do talk to him about beer slushies.
All right, so here we go. So, Josh, tell us a little bit about who you are. Like, some people out there might not know you yet.
Great. Who am I?
Who are you?
Who am I?
What drives you, Josh?
I don't know. I mean, what drives me? My name is Josh Bernstein, Brooklyn-based beer journalist, author, event producer, dad, bike rider, dumpling eater, plant grower. I mean, we're all multitudes, not just reduced to one tiny thing. I don't know. I mean, like, overall, I spend my days writing stories about primarily beer, talking about who's making things happen, where we're going, and trying to make sense of this kind of crazy modern world of brewing that didn't exist 40 years ago, much less 5 or 10 years ago. And so it's kind of in some ways, it's I'm more excited about my job now than I was 10 years ago, because then everything was just so frothy and excited, and like intensities were about excellence. And now I think as we're kind of developing our American language for what beer can be, taking over tap rooms and old industrial spaces, strip malls, we're finding new ways to integrate beer into our lives.
Awesome.
And you've been there the whole time, Josh. That's the cool thing. Like, as this revolution has been happening in beer, you've been there writing about it.
Yeah, I've
seen
been.
it all.
Yeah, I didn't make it for the first wave because I was just born, and so 78 I was born. But from the mid 90s onward, from like on the outskirts of being a kind of a college kid drinking beer to moving to New York City and drinking beer and writing about it. I mean, kind of was able to really, follow along with what happened from the mid 90s to now, and really in New York City too has been super fascinating. Because I got here in 2000, we had nothing. We had. Brooklyn Brewery had a tap room, Chelsea, there was a few other things here and there, but there wasn't really a lot to hang your hat on.
No, we were looking for beer from other places. Once beer started coming from like California and stuff, that's when it started getting exciting, right?
Yeah, it did. And I mean, it was really cool. I mean, I lived in Astoria, Queens. I remember going to this bodega, and this bodega had stuff like Sierra Nevada Bigfoot barley wine and all these other crazy beers, which you could buy by the single. And for people kind of dipping their toes into what was more flavorful in the beer world, it was a really easy, accessible way. I was making like $10 an hour, $12 an hour being a temp receptionist. And so, but you could still go home and buy 2 beers for like $1.75 each and sit in the rooftop and, watch the sunset over the skyline of New York City and feel like you're getting this amazing experience.
How exciting. Do you still like beer?
I do still like beer.
Do you still like King Cobra?
You know what? I will not say no to anything. If it's the right time and place for any beverage out there as well too. I think like a lot of people I've seen, their interest in fermentation extends beyond beer primarily. So I think a lot of us too, I think once you understand what fermentation is and how beer is one part of a broader, fermentation conversation in American society, and the intersections of people using grains and grapes and other stuff too. And I think I'm interested in exploring fermentation overall as a whole, but I'm also super excited about what beer is and where beer is going too. Don't take breaks it's like, I think people are like, oh, you're a beer guy, you must be drinking beer like all day long, and people see me drinking something else like a glass of wine, like, what are you doing? I'm like, just because you like something doesn't mean you have to sort of be so mono-minded about it and just only do that. I think you can learn a lot by trying other fermentations and seeing the characters that exist across the broad spectrum of beverages at large.
Well, I want to talk a lot about that, the beverages at large, but I also want to talk about your book, your new book, Drink Better Beer.
Yeah.
You just came. How old is this? This is a month now?
The book, not even a month. It's still 3 weeks today.
Okay, so it's brand new. I want to ask you, why this book? Why now?
Yeah, why this book?
Because I just read it, and I think it's a fantastic logical progression of your writing and your authorship in books.
Because I think if you go back to Complete Beer Course, I started working on that book in 2012, and that book kind of set beer up in the stylistic continuum that if you understand how Pilsner led to Munich Helles, and you drink your way through the progression, you can kind of understand how we got to this point of modern beer. So my taste buds are great, but they're not the taste buds they're not your taste buds. So I just want to show people like you can find this journey, find these flavors. You may not like it, but understand how these things fit together and how they've really been, I think, historically important across the continuum. And, that was great. You drink these beers, you understand the beer world. And that's a very simple and not so simple way. But I think over the last 6 years, we've just seen things change whole cloth. And beers don't sit in these neat stylistic categories. We're not imitating British milds in American society. All of our IPAs don't have English DNA in them, and things have really been blown out. So for me to sit back and try to write a book that was like, drink these beers and try these beers, understand beer in a better way, that doesn't exist.
No.
And it's also so many beers. We don't have these same distribution pathways with beer, where, I can go out by Victory Prima Pills halfway around the East Coast, and you can drink Dogfish Head 60 Minute, and you can drink Ballast Point Sculpin. Like, most releases now are so limited in their geographic sphere, so it's really hard And silly of me to be like, drink this rare release that got popped out by one brewery on a random Saturday in, Kansas City, Missouri. I mean, that's silly.
Nobody's going to be able to get that.
But I thought there's a lot of understanding we can have to understand why these beers pop up, why they're sold in these tap rooms, how you can know if they're a good thing or a bad thing, how these new beers are creating new pathways for sort of pairing. So instead of trying these beers and being smarter, it's more about understanding these concepts. And I'm not this Svengali, or is Svengali even the right word? I've got no idea. I'm not this sensei that's sitting there being like, I know everything. I mean, I always tell people I ask questions and I talk to humans, and I allow their information to really, trickle out and describe what's happening out there in the world. So I wanted to find sensory experts, brewers, bar owners that really talked about where we're at and where we're going, and let them kind of discuss stuff. And you can get super sciencey, and I think there's a place and a role and a time for sciencey, but stuff like, butyric acid, do we really need to talk about the formation for the average consumer, about how this pops up and how you can prevent it? And that's really important for brewers, but for consumers, like all these kettle sours you're buying out there, they happen because it was really comparatively easier way to create a sour note. So you can drink these beers for $12, but doing so create potential off flavors. And if you notice
butyric acid,
and if you notice this thing, here it is. I talk about that in 75 words.
Well, that's I think, to back up a little bit, that's the progression. Is you're not going style by style saying drink this beer, drink that beer. You're talking more generally in this book about flavors, about profiles, about what people can experience and what people should look for, which I found interesting too. You have a whole section on what to walk into a beer store and look for. I think that was really interesting.
We don't think when we drink, and that's okay. There's times on a Friday night when you just want to take a rocket ship to Good Times USA with your friends and make all that happen. But I think there's this lack of intentionality and pausing, I think, that we have. This is American society at large. We don't ever stop to think as much, and we're always like, go, 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 what's new, what's next?
Right.
But taking 5 seconds or 3 seconds to look in and be like, why is that beer in the window? That should not be in the window right there. Why are all of your, IPAs 3 months old and stacked up on the floor? If you think about this stuff, you don't really understand the product you're selling. And that's a problem when any industry gets hot, it gets exciting. There's tend to be this sort of rush toward embracing it, but without the sort of understanding of how things should be presented, I think. So, you walk into a store at 65 degrees, they've got UV covers on there too. They've got the right light bulbs. They've got all these things as well. There's a lot of refrigerators for the most precious beer. Things like barley wines, imperial stouts don't need the refrigeration aspect. And so, or you walk into a beer bar, there are 16 taps and not 160. And we think more equals better, but that's not always. It can be if you treat it properly. So I want people to just think a little bit more when you walk in. Without me being a teacher, it's like, have you passed the lesson test? And you understand that you need to look for these things, but just think a little bit and ask yourself why.
Well, you have to understand beer a little bit in order to know that. And I guess that's the purpose of the book, is to understand beer, because a lot of times people won't even look at the date on the beer. They'll just buy the beer. And I've bought beer without looking, and then you take it home. It's like, this is a year and a half old.
Yeah.
And that's why it sucks.
Yeah. And who do you blame? You blame the brewer.
I blame me.
You blame you. But, oftentimes people blame the brewers for any flavors that are off. And so you get a beer that's served in a dirty glassware with bubbles on the side, no head of foam, and it tastes a little sour. And then you say to yourself, ugh, I can't believe the brewer did this to me. And that's not really the case. I don't want to drink XYZ beer ever again. But, there's a lot of steps you need to unpack. What did the bar think about this beer? Did the bar treat it properly? Has it been marinating? Do they have 50 taps and they can't push through these beers fast enough, so the beers are getting old on these lines? Are their lines too long? And you don't need to know all these things about draft line maintenance. But you can ask yourself, you ask the bartender, did this, when do you clean your lines last? Was it 2 weeks? 2 weeks, the magic number. And then on and on. There's simple things you can do to think about, is this place putting the beer in the best light possible?
Could you have wrote this book 10 years ago?
Not really. I don't think 10 years ago that we really progressed so much in American as a country. Not just with ourselves, but our laws that really made stuff like taproom culture possible. In New York City, it wasn't until end of 2013, 2014 that the laws changed to allow pint sales directly to consumers.
Yay.
Before that, you had to literally give away 4-ounce samples.
Yep.
You gave away a pint, and then you hope to God that somebody bought a growler to go. So all these laws have been changing across the country and making these new pathways possible. So I don't think the way that we experience beer could have existed. I mean, these models of bars as bottle shops as well didn't exist in such a big way too. And so we had to wait for laws to change for our culture to evolve. We have so many breweries out there right now too, but do we have enough great people that are knowledgeable enough to, serve the beer and talk about the beer and guide people that may be confused about the beer? I think the Cicerone program's done a great job of pushing things forward on there too. But I mean, I think the way that we're expanding with beer in the country, we just need to have a bit more, I think, overall education and better service. I mean, tap rooms are becoming bars. Bars require good retail service people. And just because you like beer doesn't mean you can smile and talk to people on like a Tuesday evening and actually guide them where they need to be. And I think that's the hard part. I mean, tap rooms became bars overnight, but without the sort of protocols of great bar service that's existed in some of our country's best beer bars for decades. We're frightened by language sometimes too. We're frightened by the right way of saying stuff, and we're fearful of getting things wrong and seeming silly and not knowing the right way. So goza and goose are two crazy sticking points. And so what's the difference on there? And or people call
Big difference.
Everywhere people call New England IPAs NEPA. NEPA.
NEPAs.
NEPAs, which I don't know, that kind of like raises the hairs in the back of my neck just a little bit.
I think to your point about this book and language, wine has a language. Wine has a well-developed, rehearsed language. Michael Jackson built a beer language for us. I think you're starting to help redefine that with this book a little bit. I started really, really liking this book at page 6 when you started explaining that hoppy doesn't mean bitter. And that was when I started getting into the book. I was like, okay, this is something I can get behind. And you just continue to go on. I guess it does come back to language. It comes back to just understanding the words you're saying to describe the things you want.
Yeah, and that's hard.
It's very hard.
You don't understand. I mean, I think in the book we talk about stuff like language oftentimes is as very blunt tools. It's kind of like we're cutting our steak with like an axe or something like that too. We're describing stuff like, I like beers, that
Crisp.
I like beers that are crisp. I like beers that are orangey. What does orange mean to you? Orange means orange. What does that mean? But so you just describe something as both a color and a flavor.
Does it mean bright citrus acidic, or does it mean like fragrant orange blossom?
Or does it mean like heavily pulpy OJ? Or does it mean something a little bit different
Or
on
is
there?
it just colored orange?
Yeah, so that too. So I think we use language in a way. Language really helps us navigate this world in a better way too. And we don't really have a well-defined language and understanding. And I mean, it's taking a few seconds to write things down. And we don't, it doesn't mean like 2 stars, too orangey, but it means stuff like, think about what this orange means to you and finding a better way. And so I think once you develop a language or understanding of what language and how this language makes you happy as a drinker, you can go into bottle shops and breweries and tap rooms and really navigate what you want to get. You can be like, all right, I don't like really bitter beers. I don't like bitter beers too, but I like, very sort of I like soft, fruit-forward beers, thinking much more of like overripe pineapple type of notes on there too, with like maybe a little bit of like background balancing bitterness so things aren't too sweet. How much better is that than saying like, I like juicy beers or I like NEPAs? I mean, you get a really great picture of like what you want. You want something that's going to be fruit-forward, but it's not going to be just like a Merc bomb. So many of, I think, the modern beers out there don't really have a beginning and an end. They're just kind of like a seamless flow, like a never-ending story or something like that. And great movie though. But I mean,
Mediocre beer.
Yeah, mediocre beer. 2 stars.
It's something I'm noticing that we're talking here about. It's IPAs. Every time I talk to someone about beer or I teach something about beer, we're always talking about IPAs. Now, it's obvious it's the most popular style, right? Would you say is that true?
Yeah.
But I mean, there are other beer styles.
Are there
in the world.
anymore?
I thought there was.
Well, hold on. I mean, I literally just read your book, and I have a quote for you. I think you made an argument that in your book, the IPAs are a safe place for novices, but lagers are where you can spend hours appreciating beer.
That was Chris Loring from Notch, and that was kind of one of the things I tried to talk about. We're talking about the expert aspect too, so I can say things, but I've not been brewing beer for 30 years.
Right.
I've not been doing this stuff too, so what's it like for...
But you've interviewed all these brewers,
but what's it like for a brewer that's had to kowtow toward modernity, but also kind of also sees the beauty in history, and so I want to get people like Chris to really talk about why he thinks there's more challenging for that too. I can say it, but they're going to be like, whatever, Bernstein, what do you know? But I'm like, okay, yeah, right. But he said it, and he's been doing this backed up by these bona fides. So it wasn't a crutch for me to sit there, but it was just more of a way for other people that have got important voices out there in the world to do it too. But I think you're seeing this happen right now. Brewers like Hill Farmstead. I was up there back in January, dead of winter. Glorious time to visit the Northeast Kingdom in rural Vermont, like Arctic snow. But I mean, it was great to sit in the tap room, and it was a fun thing. You know, they came to prominence, helping create and popularize this sort of new breed of IPA that really swept America and the world at large. But the beer that they're spending all their time working on was, I think, Poetica. You know, a months long, you know, wood aged Pilsner, long aged, you know, bottom fermented beer, and that had spent all this time, and it was the one that they're most proud of. And all the brewers after the shift with you know, mugs and great foam on there too, and that's the thing they're working to perfect. And I think there's a lot to kind of unpack on there too. How do you perfect a beer that, you know, was created, you know, 170, 180 years ago? So for a lot of brewers that are out there now, you're seeing them tackling this next challenge, which is kind of going back and finding these classic styles, which also kind of dovetails all these other trends too, that you're in the beer world, you know, anywhere in the alcohol world, it's easy to get drunk. How do you find flavor and refreshment in a more moderate voice and alcohol content? So Pilsners, lagers offer that as well at this moment that we're in right now too, and just new challenges. But, you know, I think the IPA presents new challenges as well, that we're seeing every year all these new hop varieties come out there too. And we know these trusted and true varieties that work well, Mosaic and Citra, best friends in beer. You're seeing now that brewers are flying out to Yakima, where the majority of America's hops are grown, and trying to focus on not just getting these hops on the picking windows they want. Like, I want these beers picked on day one of the picking, when it's going to have this live profile, and not day 4. And that's the thing. It's one thing to source, but they've got to be great raw materials, and that's, I think, a challenge that we saw the last 5 years with you know, New York State hops and malts, that the quality hadn't quite caught up to our laws changed. The farm brewer license allowed us to really, like, the intersection of brewers and maltsters and
hop farmers.
Farmers, but let's be real, the quality was not there. And so people like Strong Opener Backyard in Brooklyn, they were utilizing the grains. People are like, your beer doesn't taste like the beers I want to drink. And I mean, then you say to yourself, I'm using these great hops and these grains. And I mean, you've got the narrative, but the narrative doesn't match the quality.
Right.
But I think now the quality is really catching up and creating that promise of 3 years ago of we're going to create something using local grains and hops. Over here can be something different. Like, a New England IPA uses primarily ingredients grown elsewhere.
Not in New England.
Not New England. So what's a New England or what's a New York State IPA when you're using grains? You know, if you're using whatever German malt, and you're using hops from the Yakima Valley and a yeast strain bought from a supplier out in like Oregon. Yeah. I mean, what does that mean?
It's our water, though.
It's our water, and beer is primarily water. Right. Surely that, but whatever. The storyline is matching up to the quality and able to go forward, and so there we go. And
do you think that's going to set people apart? I mean, we've got a much more crowded marketplace. You go to even a small town and you've got multiple breweries. You know, is the guy who pays attention to the hops and goes to the farm and sources them and gets the high oil cascades, is that gonna make enough of a difference for him to stay in business when someone else might not be able to?
If the beer's good and they're good brewers, I mean, always go back to, like, is your recipe any good?
All other things being equal.
I mean, it goes back to I think high quality ingredients, taking extra care, creating beers that taste different, I think will help set it apart.
Yeah. I didn't want to open up this window yet, but beer slushies. I am super excited for a beer slushie. For the reasons you're talking about, number one, and then number two, on a fucking hot day, I kind of want a beer slushie.
What do you go to a tap room for? I mean, like, why do you guys go to tap rooms?
To a tap room? I go to usually hang out with people.
Yeah,
I spend time with people.
And drink beer.
And what do you want? Do you want, like, tap there an experience? Like, why drink beer there instead?
Well, because I want the kind of beer that they're going to make. For example, KCBC. I'm always interested in what they're doing, what's next, what they're making.
So you want the experience of drinking beer from the source, doing that too, and seeing what they have that's new and fun. Slushy machines offer that same sort of thing. And, you know, as tap rooms become places that are not just for people that love beer. I mean, per se, it's like I've got 6 friends. Let's go to the tap room. Like, I don't like beer. I'm like, oh, come on, buddy. Let's go. And
They
so
have
that's
a beer
why-
slushie for you.
They got a beer slushie. They got wine. They got cider. They got seltzer. So the beer slushie offers a new draw and a new way of experiencing something. And I mean, it can be challenging. Like the slushification process concentrates, like accentuates the bitterness. So IPAs are not very good at all. The roastiness of an imperial stout can be magnified on there too. The acidity of a sour beer can be cranked to 11. So, you know, you see them sort of like back sweetening or balancing out with other things too. But I mean, it's almost like you remember that moment everybody was a cask ale? They're like, my cask ale's got habanero peppers in
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
My cask ale's got this. And it's like, whoa, dude, I can't believe we're drinking like chocolate cask ale with extra chocolate cocoa nibs. It's super cool. I mean, and
Fuck yeah, man.
yeah,
3 stars.
Yeah, 3 stars. Let's party. But that same thing that happened, I think, you're seeing that with like slushie machines, and great. They're not cheap. So I mean, it's not it's not a trivial investment. They're a couple K.
Are there a lot of breweries with slushie machines? I thought it was just one that was doing that.
I did a story about it
Yeah,
back
that's right.
in.
Good story.
I did a story about it back in like May, and that was the beginning when I was starting to see these things out there too. And nowadays there's a ton.
Yeah, since
there? Okay.
since I read his thing, I did a little research on it. There's several. Yeah,
Wow.
There's
Kind of-
there's dozens of places doing slushie machines.
Let's go for a beer slushie after this,
if we can find one.
if we can find one.
There's not a lot around here.
It's 10:45 in a rainy October morning. It's not like,
Perfect time for beer, Josh. I don't know what you're talking
For
about.
a
not-
slushie.
So I don't know, but this goes back to, I think this overall plays in this thing like how it is a tapper. Like, what's a bar?
What's the future of a bar, and what's the future of a tap room? I think is what we're talking about.
Yeah, what's that? And I mean, it's to appease lots of people. And I mean, if you could make a hard seltzer that you can make yeast jump through these hoops and eat this sugar to make somebody's like afternoon experience fun. Like, great, bud.
Is that wrong to do that? Like, this is the argument that people are going to have. Is like, oh, well, hard seltzer, it's such. And I heard it the other night. I was at Covenhoven down the street, and somebody was like, oh, White Claw, blah blah blah, and I'm like, if White Claw got somebody through the door of my brewery, and then next I could sell them a Pilsner, and then next I could sell them, you know, something with hops in it or whatever, and I could educate the person, I'd fucking sell White Claw in a heartbeat.
Why do you want to lose a sale?
Exactly. Why do you want to lose a sale? Why do you want to lose that person's friend who's a beer junkie? You know?
I mean, look. I mean, as long. I think the hardest part ever, I think, for a lot of people is realizing that you're a business. No matter what you're doing, you're a business, and that sometimes you have to make accommodations as a business. And so, it's a business. Would you rather be right, or I mean, would you rather, like, you know, die on a hill, or do you rather pay your bills?
There's enough breweries that when they were opening were like, no IPAs. We're going to be a no IPA brewery. And like
Or-
3 weeks in, they have 2 IPAs. So
Or
'cause that's
no.
what people want to drink.
Only a very small percentage of people can afford to be so sort of particular about their vision without bending and being malleable to the dictating what the market is. And I think the beer world's changing so rapidly right now on a weekly, if not monthly, you know, and yearly basis, crazy, monthly, yes, weekly, daily. I mean,
Daily,
new things
yeah.
happening all the time too. You got to stay adaptive. And if you're going to continue to drive your sales out of your tap room, I mean, you've got to think like, what brings people in? It's a DJ night. We have yoga in the morning. It's got things too. You've got this space that's going to be open for X amount of hours a day. And I mean, you're paying rent at 8 a.m. as well as 8 p.m. So that's why you're seeing tap rooms becoming more, you know, coffee shops popping in there as well. You know, other like.
Yeah, you see that.
It's in Flint, Michigan. There's like flower, you know, bouquet workshops doing things like that too. It's just, I just saw yesterday, Magic Hat Brewing is making it's another story I'm working on right now about hazy session IPAs, which session IPAs shit the bed outside Founders All Day IPA. The market pretty much collapsed.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing a ton of people as IPAs, double IPAs hazy double IPAs became the currency. But let's be real, how many of these like kind of sweetened beers with you know big flavor can you drink in a night? Name of the game in beer is selling more beer.
Right.
So hazy session IPAs are becoming more of a thing. Locally, we see like 5 Boroughs Tiny Juicy,
Which is a good beer.
which is a good beer.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got what you like about like double IPAs, but without the sort of
Without 3% alcohol.
and
extra
as
alcohol,
much like
yeah.
you know, or without as much like you know, under attenuated sugar
Yep.
like sitting in there and just leaving that film in your mouth too. But I mean, it's all about finding new ways to draw people in your doors and sell stuff. And I mean, sounds kind of like bald-faced consumeristic, and part of it is you can think about that in the most sort of depressing terms, or you can think about finding ways to kind of activate these moments to give somebody a reason to care about something.
Well, give somebody a reason to care about. But I mean, beer. And I don't want to get on too much of a soapbox. But beer drinkers are so promiscuous. They'll go to every brewery that they can get to. You want to build a community that makes sure that you're on their rotation.
Yeah.
That people come back and they have a reason to come back and they have a reason to engage. I mean, I think. Honestly, beers. If that's what beer slushies do for me, I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm all for it. I mean,
Okay.
maybe if I were not older and hadn't been through the bend, I mean, like John, you grew up doing music stuff too. I mean, I grew up doing like.
Speaking of older, John.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And
But
beer.
you know,
I've been doing beer too for a while.
You know, but no, I'm a kid in the '90s. That means I grew up in this sort of DIY indie rock spirit of, you know, we made zines over at Kinko's and we self-distributed. Like we put on like punk rock shows in abandoned bank vault basements and things like that. We found these spaces and created something out of it too. And, you know, I saw a lot of this happening with beer as well. And I still see that sort of independent, try anything, community building spirit streak, as I think was at the core of a lot of beer. Mm-hmm. And that's what still keeps me excited about it, is finding ways to bring people together and bring them to spaces. And, you bring people to a different space, like the cheese cave, the Crown Finish Caves in our neighborhood in Brooklyn's an old 1850s Brooklyn brewery. And they've turned the lagering tunnels under the streets into a cheese aging facility. But we do beer events there every so often. But it also, so you're bringing this cheese community and this beer community and this history community all together in these new ways, in a new space and a new way of communicating. And I think what beer overall today, beer gives us a new way of gathering and a new way of communicating.
You've got an event coming up. You're doing another one. You're organizing another one of your homebrew tours.
Yeah,
Yes,
we're doing a lot of events.
What other
up.
events do I not know about?
Good heavens, what am I not doing this fall? I don't know. I mean, we talk about experiences, and it's my 5th book, which my parents don't even care anymore, but I care. But I care. And I think the ways we have to go about, my first book came out in 2011. I was booked on TV shows like VH1, Morning Stuff, and they're like, here's a thing called craft beer. Tell me about these flavors, Josh Bernstein. I'd be like, this one tastes like this. And they're like, whoa, that's nuts. Nobody cares anymore. In that same sense of like, eyes wide open, new world investigation. Mm-hmm. So I used to be able to like stand on concrete floors and smile. And they're like, a beer book? That's crazy. Nobody cares in that same way anymore. So what I'm trying to do is actually, I think with the book, what created in the book was sort of new ways forward of discussing what beer is, with lessons that can apply to breweries across the broad spectrum. That there's going to be something in there that talks about what somebody is doing out there. So I'm trying to do stuff like in Allagash. I went to Allagash, spent the day sitting through.
Oh yeah, talk about the sensory panel. That was really cool.
Yeah, so I went to Allagash and I spent the full day sitting through their sensory panel. Like, how do you ensure a beer tastes the same time and time again? So I sat there and, so they had basically a true to type panel. So to make sure this beer tasted how Allagash White should taste. And you weren't told what was wrong with it. And you had to figure out if it was true to type. And, I basically was an idiot because I kept saying there was something wrong, but it wasn't wrong. It was just elevated. It just showed me there's just all these that there are thresholds of intensity that are acceptable, and they want things to exist within this realm. And how do you do that? So I was able to sit through sort of blind taste panels and other things, and take all their market study tests and do all that to really talk about what it means for a brewery to ensure that their beer tastes the way it should taste. So I thought that was really kind of peeling the onion back a little bit. So what we're going to do is, so how do you go from grain to glass to ensure quality? Going to go up there, so you get a behind the scenes tour. Going to walk through with one of the sensory specialists up there and do that. So everybody gets a copy of the book that goes through this too. So it's not just,
that's cool.
It's like, meet Josh. Josh is a beer writer from Brooklyn. Tell us about his life, Josh. But it's more like we get to walk through and talk about all these things. So you walk out there with both a book and knowledge. Or
when is this happening?
November 7th.
November 7th.
In Portland, Maine. We're going to go out to Pittsburgh, probably I think the 21st, with Cinderlands Brewing. I talked to them about, Kvike, Norwegian yeast strain, Kvike, no matter how you pronounce it, we're all finding new ways to say it.
Yeah, it's Kvike.
Kvike, yes. The Kvike and the dead is always going to be, or I think the punny thing was a Kvike and the delicious. I always mangle it. It's like one of those things I've always got to memorize. But working with Cinderlands Brewing, most likely to do an event where what is this beer like at 2 days? What's it like in 4 days? We drink this beer, see this beer fermentation. We talk about this overall. And then how beers like this can free up resources and demands in a world that's beset by climate change and all this other stuff too. How can creating beer and by using yeast strains that require less sort of, they require less time in tanks. You don't require as many electricity and refrigeration that the heat goes out. This beer still works. How can these strains both create market differentiation and also be much better stewards of environmental usage too? So we sit up there and we drink these beers at 2 days and 4 days, and you walk out there also maybe with a 4-pack of beer that is that. And so just ways to go about doing stuff that are different than just...
That's super cool. And then I like the tasting.
For more information on Kvike strains, listen to episode 2.
Yeah.
See what you can brew with our interview with Lance Shaner from Omega Yeast.
Yeah, Lance is great. But, so then other junk, I think I'll be sitting over at going to Victory Brewing the 22nd and talking about how can a brewery that's been around for 25 years, like how do you evolve with the times? How do you do something like that?
Yeah.
So we talk about Prima Pils has changed the recipe to be much more approachable to the modern market, and how do even historic brands change. Then we have the slow pour pills, and we talk about the intentionality of service. And so you get to drink what we're talking about in the book. And then homebrew tours too.
And then homebrew tours.
The homebrew tours have been sort of a definite passion of mine for a decade. 10-year anniversary this fall,
Whoa,
actually.
That's awesome.
Which is nuts. I mean, the general rule was that go into 3 different homebrewers' homes, try their beer, have fun, meet them, 4-hour, almost like a 4-hour roving voyeuristic house party where you get to see somebody's kitchen sink in their bathroom and their beer. And it's just New York City voyeurism / imbibing / community building. And everybody from Transmitter to KCBC to Strong Rope to Finback, head brewer at Gun Hill and Yonkers Brewing, the brewers over McKellar, and some of the brewers at the other half, and on and on and on. They were all kind of part of this tour at one point, and we had events, and it was a great way to build community, and in some cases build, supporters that invested in these breweries too, which, I mean, it's great. It's just been such an amazing way to kind of help build New York City's beer scene. And so I've lost the ability to spend so many Saturdays, because I used to do these like every 3 or 4 weeks. But everybody I know now owns a brewery or works in a brewery.
Us too.
Or they've, and I've got a daughter that'll be 6 in November, and I can't give up my Saturdays in the same way that I used to, So Brett Vanderbrook is going to be leading the tour. He's a great home brewer, also has a theater background, so he knows how to perform, because being a tour guide's part performative, part wrangling and part, informative, wrangling and dealing with people who've had a couple beers.
Absolutely.
And Brett's both works in theater, so understands performing, homebrews, knows the world too, has been a bartender, knows what it's like to deal with people that have had a beer. So we're going to be doing a tour on November 9th, Saturday, going through Park Slope, Brooklyn. We're getting all the information together. Tickets should be going on sale, I think. I'm not sure when this is going to be airing, but going to be airing or ticketing.
Pretty soon, yeah.
Yeah, probably tickets go on sale, I think, either October 9th or 10th, so in a few days.
Yeah, we'll get links up. We'll have all the links for all this stuff.
30 tickets, pretty slim, a great way to meet fellow beer lovers and also have a way to, fall in love or just meet new neighborhoods in New York City. Because I always saw this as we all get caught in our routines and we do our things, go to the same shops, the pizza shops and the coffee shop, this too, and we spend our Saturdays. But, we've done tours. We go to start in Roosevelt Island and go on the tram or and we end up at a place where there's a rock show with dry ice. So, just like new ways or we go on the Staten Island ferry and we drink on the boat, then go to local breweries and just different ways of exploring New York City and seeing neighborhoods. And it's community building in a sense too. And we've been doing this, and I still try to do it as much as I can to really still support. It's hard just with life being life, but I still think it's important for me to show up when I can and still keep these events going on and support the homebrewers and really give a voice to them on a different platform. I mean, none of us thought we'd get to where we are. I don't know where I am, like having written 5 books and doing a bunch of stuff. I never could have dreamed of this. I think a lot of brewers and homebrewers never could have dreamed of where they got. And in some ways, it feels like the work's not done yet, and I still want to keep going. The work's not done, period, and it's finding new ways to connect with people, and that's really with the writing, the events I do, and it's hard. I mean, I'm ostensibly a writer that's also an event producer, cheerleader, consultant, dad, all these bike rider, all these things all together. And
Dumpling eater.
Dumpling eater, yeah.
Yeah, Kaifeng and Sunset Park's pretty awesome. I took my kid there like 2
You
weekends
gonna do
ago.
a dumpling book?
The dumpling book's been written, We've all got our...
Well, you haven't written one.
I know.
Beer and dumpling?
I don't know if there's enough dough in dumpling books.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh,
And on that note,
On that note, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, that's it.
Oh,
I mean,
Josh, this is great.
so yeah, we'll see what happens with the book. I don't know. I mean, who knows how this book's going to happen? Drink Better Beer. I'm excited. I think it's a book that, I mean, the one thing I'll say about the book is just that you think publishing, there's these giant teams that are out there that are like, let's prop you up and help you make it happen. There's a sweet spot. So basically the majority of authors are something called mid-list and backlist authors, where they're sort of like the blue collar backbone of the industry. They're never the ones like the J.K. Rowlings. Publishing industry needs J.K. Rowlings and stuff to keep the business. It's like the record biz. It's like, I need to have like my big hits to have everything else be kind of okay.
Right.
So it requires you to do a lot more event building and all these things too. And also with the book, my editor left at the beginning of the project. My photo editor's dad had health issues, so she pretty much left. So I had a new editor, and I was just like, hey, John, I don't know you. Nobody's going to help me on this. So why don't we just do the book that I want to write? So I'm tired of my voice getting neutered. Like, I'm a pretty voicey writer. By that means, it's like, by voice, I mean you have a distinct viewpoint in a way that you like to see language expressed in the world, information. And so it was just like, hey, John, I just want to write the book with my voice. And he's like, way to go, bud, let's do it. And so then I told him how I wanted the language laid out and the information we had and the way we thought we could have takeaways. When you create an information delivery system, it gives designers the ability. And then I went out and we made sure that we sought out the best photography and that paid photographers, and paid some of the writers that
That's
were in
amazing.
the book too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like out of my pocket, like we had Jeff Allworth talking about why I go to the Pacific Northwest, and Joe Stang, Franconia, and other people too, and paid people, Evan Rail about drinking in the Czech Republic, and great writers that know their scenes better than I do. It was much more akin to going back in time to becoming much more zine oriented and like self-starting, and like all the photos in there we sought out. Most of it sought out great artwork from photographers I knew. Then we're like, you will get paid. It's not a lot of money, but you're upfront, so you're going to get paid. And I just don't want to see anybody taken advantage of, and making sure everybody gets their. Yeah, I want to have a good viewpoint. Everybody gets paid, and we create a project together.
Well, you created a beautiful piece. I mean, not only is it very informative, and I found it a fascinating read, but it looks beautiful. I mean, you could put this, it could definitely be a coffee table book, but it could also look good on your shelf. I loved reading it. The photos were top notch.
That's it. I mean,
it's great.
I think nobody ever, I've said this before, but nobody ever picks up a book. They're like, what beautiful words, Josh. You've really got a nice apostrophe right there. And then
well placed.
Well placed apostrophe, Bernstein.
But it felt like a conversation. It felt like sitting down and having a chat with you about beer.
Yeah.
And it was really, and other people too. I mean, it wasn't just you writing this, and I noticed that. It was very great.
Yeah, I think one of the comments I got from Morella Amato, one of the a master cicerone who was in the book too, I talked to her about it, and she, interviewed for the book. She got a copy. She read it. She's like, just the way that you integrated she's like, I've done this type of stuff before, but integrating quotes and stories and knowledge, and the way you pack the page with like information in a way that, and the information felt fun and not something in that way too, that you could pick it up and read it. You read it in bits or read it all the way through, and you still find something new. And I think we also give light to new voices in there, and other people like Hobie Wedler, a blind sensory specialist, talking about what happens to remove eyesight and how we can understand and why we rely so much on our eyes. Or Tom Shellhammer, Oregon State, why we're crazy for this ludicrous push toward double hopping and double dry hopping, quadruple dry hopping, and but their voices and not me. And I think that's, these are the backbone of the industry that don't really get as much, or was it Jeff Bruning? How do you run a bar with 262 taps?
Right? That was fascinating.
In Iowa. And even he admits it's silly.
It's a little much.
Yeah, but I don't know. So that's it. And all I can say is that I'm really happy with what I did. And that's as best as we can hope for. And, I think when people get it in their hands, they'll see that. And, I hope the content sells itself and the events we do make you excited to understand what the book's all about.
Well, after this interview, you're going to sell 1 million of these. So
I hope everybody pays full price for it, too.
Full price.
I really go out
Yes.
and spend the extra $5.
Yeah.
Don't buy it on Amazon.
Amazon's
buy it from
actually,
Josh.
for some reason,
Is
Buy it here.
Amazon good? Buy
buy the Bitter
Nesters?
Nesters. Amazon's for some reason not discounting it, which is great. But
That's
also
awesome.
bad. Great and bad. It's one of these things where it's like, why are you so cheap, Amazon? But then everybody's like, why is this book full price? Should I really pay full price for something? Somebody's screwing me over here.
Where should we buy the book, Josh? Other than Bitter and Esther's.
Anywhere people feel confident. If they have a local bookstore, you can go to indiebound.com, put in your address, support your local bookstore if you want to support your community.
Awesome.
I try to support the local bookstores as much as I can. Send them stickers. So if you're listening and you're carrying my book, I'll send you stickers.
Do you sell it on your site, or does that go to the Amazon?
I do too. I sell it on my site. More,
And what is your site, Josh?
JoshuaMBernstein.com. Yeah, I sell it on my site more out of it's fun. I mean, I still got to go to the dark hole of happiness and endless tears, aka the Brooklyn post office, but and myself. But it's,
Wow, really?
Yeah, but yeah, there's no assistant at this.
So
point.
buy it from a local bookstore and don't make Josh do that.
If you want to, you can. I'll walk, and you can and I'll have authentic Josh Bernstein trademark tears on each one, or I'll just collect a vial of tears so I can wet my stamps with them.
There you
I
go.
Put them on there.
Josh, thank you so much for
Thanks.
talking. I
That
think
was great.
we've talked so long, man. This is great. So thanks a lot, Josh, for talking to us there.
Very informative interview.
Yeah.
A lot of what I really liked about it was the kind of state of homebrew that Josh has witnessed throughout his time as a journalist in New York, and he really has a really open eye, and he really can see what's happening. It was enlightening.
And
I
he
would say.
speaks about it in his books and his writing so fluently.
He does.
He really makes it approachable. And I mean, every time I read an article by him, I learn something new that I wasn't aware of before. So it's absolutely awesome to have him here. And I'm just gonna keep following him, keep finding out what he's doing. Oh, and buy his book.
Buy the book.
Drink Better Beer.
We've got it
Even if
here.
you know everything about beer, you're gonna learn something new. It's a blast. I think that's about it.
He's got a bunch of events coming
Josh,
up.
I'm sorry. Yes, he's got a bunch of events coming up, and we'll put all the links up. We'll put all the links on the website.
He mentioned them in the interview.
check
but
them all.
Those sound really cool too. I mean,
Those do sound really cool. The one in Portland sounds particularly interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting stuff too. It's like, if I may pontificate more on Josh's
Pontificate,
interview,
John, please.
because we can have breweries and drink beer and all this stuff, but stuff that Josh is doing, like these events as far as sensory tasting and all that, is just another level of beer education and beer appreciation. And I think that sort of thing needs to continue. And I think it's great that Josh is doing that along with other people. But it's just one of those things that's really cool about the craft beer industry and the homebrew industry as well.
And the nice thing is he's not like settling. He's not like resting on his laurels and just writing some articles and doing the thing. He's going out and trying to find something new and interesting to like expand.
Something new and
and
interesting.
spooky.
He is, and we love that about Josh, and we also love the fact he gives you a sticker and a pin anytime you buy a book.
He'll give you a sticker and a pin most of the time.
Most of the
He's got
time,
extras, yeah.
If you run into him on the street.
Just ask him for a sticker. All right, I think that's about it. So everybody have a spooky Halloween.
Watch out for those zombies. Say Hayes is calling.
Hayes, my precious. Hayes. Hayes. Hayes.